Have you ever decided to completely change your life? Threw yourself into it with everything you had, only to find yourself back where you started just a few weeks later? Maybe you joined a gym and stopped going after 10 days. Maybe you decided to wake up early every morning and lasted 4 days before giving up. Maybe you set big, ambitious goals, felt the excitement of a fresh start, and then watched that excitement slowly disappear. Maybe you started to believe that something was simply wrong with you, that other people had discipline and willpower you somehow lacked. My name is Eli, and today's story is about a young man who kept failing at changing his life, until one quiet afternoon, a retired teacher showed him something that changed everything. In a small university town there lived a young man named Leo. Leo was not lazy. He was not unmotivated. In fact, he wanted to improve his life more than almost anything else. Every few months, Leo would feel a surge of determination and announce a new plan to himself. Starting Monday, I will wake up at 5 in the morning, exercise for 1 hour, read for 2 hours, eat perfectly, and cut out all bad habits completely. And every single time Leo would begin with genuine enthusiasm. For 3 or 4 days, sometimes even a full week, he would follow through. Then slowly the motivation would fade. 1 missed morning became 2. 2 became a week. Before long, Leo had quietly abandoned the plan entirely, telling himself he would try again next month. This cycle repeated itself so many times that Leo began to believe there was something fundamentally broken about him. Why can I never stick to anything? He asked himself one grey afternoon, sitting on a bench in the town square, discouraged and frustrated. An elderly man named Professor Hale, a retired teacher known throughout the town for his quiet wisdom, sat down beside him. "You look like someone fighting a battle they keep losing," Professor Hale said gently. Leo let out a tired laugh. "That's exactly what it feels like. I keep trying to change my life and I keep failing. I set big goals, I start strong, and then I just fall apart." Professor Hale nodded thoughtfully. "Tell me, Leo, when you decide to change your life, how much do you try to change at once?" Leo shrugged. "Everything. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it properly." Professor Hale smiled. "Come with me for a moment." He led Leo to a small garden nearby, where an old apple tree stood with several pale, struggling branches. "This tree," Professor Hale said, "has been slowly getting weaker for years. Now, imagine I decided to fix it today by pouring an entire month's worth of water on it all at once." Leo looked at the tree. "It would drown," he said. Professor Hale nodded. "Exactly. Too much, too fast, destroys rather than helps. But what if instead I gave it a small, consistent amount of water every single day? It would slowly recover," Leo said slowly, beginning to understand. Professor Hale sat down on a nearby bench. "Your habits are exactly like this tree, Leo. You keep trying to flood your life with change all at once, and then wonder why it drowns every time." Leo was quiet, listening carefully. Professor Hale continued, "What if, instead of trying to change everything in a week, you committed to becoming just 1% better each day? Not dramatically better, not impressively better, just barely better. So small that it almost seems pointless." Leo frowned. 1% doesn't sound like much. Professor Hale smiled gently. 1% improvement every day for 1 year. Do you know what that becomes? Leo shook his head. You become 37 times better than where you started, Professor Hale said quietly. Not through dramatic effort, through tiny, consistent steps that compound over time. Leo sat with this idea for a long moment. Professor Hale continued, "The problem is not that you lack discipline, Leo. The problem is that you have been trying to win the entire war on the first day. Real change doesn't work that way. Real change looks boring from the outside. It looks like 2 pages read instead of 0. It looks like 5 minutes of walking instead of none. It looks like 1 glass of water replaced. Tiny, invisible, until one day it isn't." That evening Leo returned home and made a different kind of decision than he ever had before. No dramatic plan, no sweeping declaration. Instead, he wrote 3 small commitments on a piece of paper. Read 2 pages before bed. Walk for 5 minutes after lunch. Sleep 30 minutes earlier than usual. That was it. Nothing impressive. Nothing that would turn heads or inspire anyone. But he did it the next day, and the day after, and the day after that. When he felt like doing more, he resisted the urge. He stuck to the small commitment. He showed up every single day, even on the days he didn't feel like it, even when 2 pages felt almost too easy to matter. Weeks passed, then months. The 2 pages became a chapter. The 5 minutes became 20. The slightly earlier bedtime became a full hour of better sleep. Something else changed too. Leo stopped feeling like a failure, because he was no longer setting himself up for failure. He was building a foundation of small wins, each one invisible on its own, but slowly becoming something he had never managed to build before. A consistent identity. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Leo passed Professor Hale on the same bench where they had first spoken. "I finished 12 books this year," Leo said, almost surprised by his own words. "I have exercised consistently for 8 months. I feel completely different." Professor Hale looked at him warmly. "You didn't become a different person," he said. "You became the person your small choices were always quietly building." Leo looked at the old apple tree in the garden nearby. Its branches were fuller now, greener, stronger. "Small and consistent," Leo said softly, almost to himself. Professor Hale smiled. "Small and consistent always wins. Every single time." My perspective on this story is simple. We live in a world that celebrates dramatic transformation, overnight success, and radical change. We are constantly shown the highlight reel of other people's results, without ever seeing the quiet, boring, consistent days that built them. The truth is that most lasting change is invisible for a very long time. It happens in the 2 pages nobody applauds, the 5-minute walks nobody notices, the small choices nobody sees. You do not need to change everything at once. You only need to get slightly better today than you were yesterday, done consistently. That is more powerful than any dramatic resolution you have ever made. If this story reminded you that small steps matter more than you think, please subscribe to Jerry Tales and like this video. It helps us bring more stories that remind us how real change actually happens. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.